I like to give some images or some kind of graphics to explain what coaching is. And one of the earliest models that I was introduced to when I first became a coach is called the bridge coaching model. Very simple. Coaching is like a bridge. Actually, it's like building a bridge. As the bridge builder, you approach either a great Grand Canyon-sized gulf, and you want to get to the other side and you can't, or you have a river that won't allow you to pass, and so you want to get from where you are to where you want to be. And so as a coach, you help build the bridge. You talk to the person about what's your first step. Or if they've already started building, what's getting in the way of you continuing to build this bridge? Or maybe they haven't even thought about building a bridge. You might brainstorm with them. So let's just kind of take a couple minutes. How could we get to the other side? And you'd brainstorm a bit about how to then construct a bridge. So that's one very, very simple way to look at what coaching is. And those of you that have already worked with a coach or are a coach, you can see that in the coaching process. And actually, this is the model that I used for the first 5 years that I coached people, not only in the church, but also in the business world, and nobody asked for their money back. So it's a very effective tool that you can use. My favorite model, though, is the tandem bike coaching model. Now, in order to understand this, you have to know what a tandem bike is. And I'm assuming that everyone in the room, if you've not ridden one, you've at least seen one, if not in person, on TV. Now, most bikes are not tandem. Most bikes you just get on and you ride. Most people in the world that we live in are not working with a coach. They just get on their bike, whatever it is that they're working on, the project, and they go from point A to point B. When you're coaching, though, it is like riding a tandem bike. The person on the front is the client. It's either an individual or a group or a church or an organization that wants to move forward. The person on the back is the coach. Now, why I like this model is that on the tandem bike, the handlebars on the front move, don't they? The handlebars on the back do not. As a coach, I do not steer. I do not tell you where to go, but rather the client, the person that I am seeking to empower, is in that decision place. They decide where they want to go. Now, I was teaching this model a couple of years ago, and there were a couple of motorcycle enthusiasts in the room. And they said, may we just share one thing? I said, sure, absolutely. When you have someone on the back of a motorcycle, if they do not lean in properly, that bike will get out from under you, and you have all kinds of havoc. So, on the back as the coach, while we are not steering, we've got to lean in. We have got to cooperate. We have got to come alongside of the person that we are coaching. So the person on the front then, the person that we are wanting to empower, they steer, they set the course, they are the primary decision maker. Now, give this some further thought. I'm on the back. My view is obstructed by this person in front of me. I'm not the best person to decide where they need to go because my view is obstructed. The person on the front knows best. So when we're talking in a moment about a coaching approach, the person that we are wanting to empower, or the people, they have the view that is most important at this point. We are seeing things skewed a bit, just a little bit different. So what is the role of the coach then on the back? I never knew this, but in tandem bike riding, the person in the back actually gets the bike going. They put their foot down first and move that bike in motion. So when you're coaching someone and you're adopting a coach approach, you're often asking things like, so what's the most important thing for us to think about today? Where do you want to be a year from now? Tell me about the bridge you want to build. Not only do we get things started, but we add speed and performance without drain. we tuck in again. Just like that person on the back seat of the motorcycle. We do not want to get in the way, but we want to tuck in. We want to lean in. We want to really get the person that we are coaching. And when needed, we give a little extra push. So let me just stop there for a moment. I have one other coaching model I'd like to share with you, but questions so far about what coaching is. Oh, okay. All right. So I have one other model. This is, I only get to do this when I travel locally. It doesn't travel in a suitcase well. It travels in a backpack really well. But this is called an expandable ball. I bought it on Amazon.com, not Toys R Us, by the way, at Amazon, where I buy all of my stuff anymore. And, if this expandable ball just stayed like this, it's a ball, right? That'd be okay. But we all know that there is within this something waiting to expand, to come out, to develop. It's the same thing in our coaching. The people that we are working with, they're pretty good. They're doing well. They're okay. But there is more within them just waiting to develop and expand and to come out. This is what a coach does, is we bring out the very best in another person. I think that's a pretty good model of what we do as a coach. So, having shared with you 3 different models, what is coaching then? First of all, coaching is, and see what's happening. Here's why it's important that you work with a coach on an ongoing basis. Right? Because we don't want to get you like this and then have the wind knocked out of you. We want you to be at this point. And a coach will help you do that. So what is coaching then? It is developmental and discovery based. In other words, what's emerging? What's kind of the next piece that's going to just come forth in this person? We are tapping into the greatness or the giftedness of the other person or other people. So we're not looking at what's wrong, what needs to be fixed, but what needs to be further developed. What if we focused on the strength and developed that further? What's possible? Okay. We are then viewing the church or the person as whole and complete. Now, I should probably tell you just a little bit more about me. In addition to being from the Lancaster, Reading, Pennsylvania area, I am a United Methodist pastor. And for about 20 years, I served United Methodist churches. I served 3 of them. And each time I was appointed to a new church, here's the scenario that played out. I was told this church needs you to step in and do this right away. And that fed into, I'm a fixer, by the way. I'm still in recovery. That kicked in, okay, in the first 6 months, we need to change everything because they've been doing worship wrong. The way that they have been cutting checks has been wrong as well. Everything is wrong, so we've got to change everything. I was not viewing the church as whole and complete, but rather broken and in need of being fixed. In a coaching approach, we are seeing them as whole and complete. Now, does that mean that there couldn't be some tweaks, there couldn't be some things that we could do differently? Absolutely. But I am viewing this as a place that God has already been at work in. And I've just been placed here for a temporary amount of time to just walk alongside with them to continue what is already at work. Now, that's a very different way to show up than in the first 6 months, everything's going to change. So we view everything as whole and complete. Another way to look at it, it is customized learning I'm shortening the learning curve. So God's at work in this church or in this people. How can we get there sooner, quicker, and faster? How might we respond to the need quicker? So you heard in the opening about data-driven evangelism. The needs are great. The longer we wait, the more children that go hungry, the more people that are not empowered. So how can we shorten the learning curve for us as leaders in this community? For the most part, we are not fixing people, and for the most part, we are not telling them what to do. Another way to describe what coaching is, it's just a really great conversation in which both people come away feeling really, really good. I think it was Oscar Wilde said something like, some people brighten the room when they walk in.
Oh my gosh.
Others brighten it when they walk out. Coaching is a really, really great conversation between two people or two groups of people in which the other stands taller and feels empowered, and like the expandable ball, they are living into their full potential that they knew was there all along. They just didn't know how to get it out and how to move forward. So again, we're just doing some basics here, kind of 101 coaching. So you might be saying, how is this different then from therapy? Well, there's a lot of overlap. In both disciplines, in both approaches, you listen. But the listening is very, very different. The listening typically in therapy, now not all the time, but typically is about recovery. Something has happened in the past that's getting in the way, so we've got to recover. In coaching, this person is not perfect, but I want to help them to discover what's unique about them, what they're called to do. So it's a shift from recovery to discovery. Another way to put it is that an archaeologist would dig down into the ground. They get those sifting kind of screens and find little tiny pieces of artifacts that have huge meaning in them. That's archaeology. As a coach, though, we are not about archaeology, we are about architecture. We need to sift through a bit of the past only so that we can go up higher. We need to build a foundation in order to go up. Many people report that coaching is therapeutic because it feels good to move forward. It feels good to make some progress. So what's the difference between coaching and consulting? It's the recognized expert. So when you hire a consultant, you pay them lots of money for their expertise. When you work with a coach, you're not hiring them for their expertise, you're hiring them for your expertise. And they help draw your expertise out of you. Okay? Now here's where the athletic coach image, I think, does work. The athletic coach does not get on the playing field, typically. They don't run laps, they don't go for the ball when it's being tossed, but they help you go for the ball. They help you go around the track. They bring out what is in you already so that you can move forward. So who's the recognized expert and who's doing the majority of the work? When you hire a consultant, they're doing it. When you coach someone, they're going to do their own work. They're the ones that are going to take the steps forward. So my mom is 88 years old, and for most of my professional adult life, people would ask her, so what's Val doing? She'd say, well, he's a pastor. And they'd be like, oh yeah, that's neat. How's he doing? They knew what it meant to be a pastor. For the last 20 years, they've asked her, so what's Val doing? Oh, he's a coach. Huh? What sport team? No, he works with pastors and leaders. Huh? Well, what does he do? And here's what my 88-year-old mom will say. Well, he talks on the phone to people. He really listens to them, but he doesn't tell them what to do, and they pay him money. A consultant does most of the work. When you're coaching, you do the work. One more. Mentoring. And all of these disciplines are great approaches. Please don't hear me saying that therapy or consulting is never helpful. Sometimes that's actually what you need, is therapy. About a third of the people I coach, I recommend for therapy at some point. It's really needed and necessary in order for them to move forward. In mentoring, though, it is the mentor's insights and experiences we want to tap into. In coaching, it's your insights and your experiences we want to tap into. Okay. All right. So, before I move forward, I want to just stop for a moment real quick. Anything I can say more about so far as we move forward on a coaching approach to ministry? Okay. Either I've done really, really well, or you're ready for dinner, which comes right after this. So
when you begin,
yeah. Yes.
how do you know? Well, obviously you contracted on the front end,
Mm-hmm.
but just cold, how do you know which one of these tools you need to pull out the box?
Ah, good question. So how do I know whether to start with a therapy approach or consulting or teacher or just good old pastoral care? So in my experience, the place to begin is with the coach approach, and to assume that the person is whole and complete, to assume that the church is basically healthy. And then along the way, and we do a lot of listening as a coach, as you're listening and as you're learning, if you begin to hear therapy issues, or you begin to hear that they really need a good consultant because they don't have in their toolkit what they need, then you can shift into that area. So I'm learning that for me it works better to start with, I'm a coach, and then shift. Does that help?
Which one is the most difficult to unlearn?
Oh,
Consultant, the
oh man. So it sounds like you've got a little bit of history there with that. And, one of the comments we hear, we teach coaching all around the world, and one of the common comments is that the challenge with learning how to coach is not really learning, it's unlearning. Mm-hmm. It's letting go of other habits that have gotten in the way. So, for example, my name is Val and I'm a fixer. I'm in recovery. I've been coaching for 20 years and it is still really tempting for me to go in and to just say, well, you just need to do this, this, and this. It's a lifelong process of unlearning that. So it's going to depend on the person. I know a number of therapists that it's really hard to take off that therapist hat. And they've got to regularly just do it. Does that help? Great questions. All right, other questions before we move forward?
How or what we can do about, example, if I hire a coach
Mm-hmm.
and they come to coach in the church,
Mm-hmm.
coaching the church, and they end in facilitator or doing what we can do in that moment.
So instead of staying in the coaching role, they've shifted into something else.
Yes.
Okay.
So that we shall stop or
Okay.
what?
So did everyone hear her question? You've brought a coach in, and instead of coaching, they're now using a different approach. Mm-hmm. So my response partly would be, before you ever bring someone in, I'm a firm believer that every coach needs to be part of the International Coach Federation and have accredited coach training where you learn that this is the role and how to stay in the role. Mm-hmm. So before you ever work with someone, I wouldn't hire anyone unless they actually have coach training and they've been supervised. You would never go to a dentist that didn't have accreditation or supervision, would you? So that'd be the first. Yeah, I wouldn't. I hate going to the dentist anyway.
Yeah.
I want to make sure they know what they're doing when they go in. So that's the first part. The second is, why not simply just say, can we push the pause button for a moment? I need you to be in the role of coach. Please step into that role. And if they're worth anything, they will honor that. So, go ahead.
In new church work,
Mhm.
when you get a coach,
Mhm.
I had one of my colleagues that tried to distinguish between, are you coaching the project or coaching the person?
Ah, okay.
Those are two different.
Yes. Okay. So one of the guiding principles, and I'm just going to share a couple of them with you in a moment. One of the guiding principles of true coaching is you coach the person, not the problem.
Or the project?
Or the project. You coach the person, not the project. Here's why. You coach the project, you might resolve it now, but the next time the next project shows around, they've not been empowered or equipped to deal with the next project. They've not been developed. You coach the person, they've been developed now. They do not need you now in that role or in that capacity. So coaching is about how do we develop human potential and human people. Does that make sense?
Yes, I
Oh.
just, wanted to, I thought it was helpful
Mhm.
for me to hear.
Okay.
Because, you want the project to succeed.
Yes.
And sometimes it seems like, they never have done this before. And so it's like sometimes trying to help them learn what they're to do.
Yes. So there are times, and those of you that are coaches are in the room, there are times when you need to be direct. Because they've never done this or it's not part of their expertise, you may need to step in temporarily and say, the other churches that I've worked with have done this. It's worked for them. What do you think? Now you're stepping back into coach role, letting them decide where they want to go. Sometimes you need to do that. Great questions. Okay, let me share with you a couple of the guiding principles because I think we're getting in that direction anyway. And then we're going to talk about how do you then apply this in the local church setting. So one of the guiding principles that really shows up throughout all those models that I've shared with you is that there is greatness and giftedness in everyone. In other words, we want to focus on the A in every person. Now, you've heard me say 2 times already that I'm a recovering fixer. When I meet a new group, or when I meet a new person, my tendency is not to see your A, but rather to see what you need to improve. I worked for 18 months to shift that and to begin now to see the greatness in another person. Now, last week I was in Los Angeles with a theological seminary, and they said, well, theologically, how do we resolve focusing on the A in other people? And I was kind of taken aback by, well, what do you mean? What's the problem with focusing on the A in other people? Well, aren't we all broken and fall short of the glory of God? Absolutely. But do we not also have the fingerprints, the imprints of God? Every one of us? Why not focus on that? Nancy Klein has written a great book called More Time to Think. By the age of 8, most of our thoughts about ourselves are negative. Yeah, 2nd grade, right? The average 2nd grader, most of their thoughts about themselves are negative. Now, step into a church that focuses on judgment. They're already heaping judgment on themselves. We put more on. Now, not that we all need a Savior, absolutely, but maybe what we need first, though, is to have someone recognize the greatness in us. Nancy Klein has also done some research that it takes 5 acknowledgments just to level the playing field for every perceived negative. So, in coaching, our focus is not on what's wrong, but what's right. So now, if I were to go to a new church, my first 18 months would be what's great about these people and just applauding them because God has already been at work here long before I arrived. And as we're discovering what the next chapter is, I'm just going to applaud and acknowledge for who you are and what you've been up to. So we focus on the greatness and the giftedness in everyone. we all have something to contribute. Calling is not just for clergy. So last week I was in Los Angeles. The week before that I was in São Paulo, Brazil. And by the way, it's winter there. It's freezing. It's 65 degrees. They're freezing. I'm like, this is great. What are you complaining about? So while I was in São Paulo, Brazil, in the winter, I went to a church called the Snowball Church. Now I want you to get the irony of the name of this church. It probably hasn't snowed in São Paulo in decades, but they've named their church that was born 20 years ago the Snowball Church, because like a snowball, they wanted to be like a snowball, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the image that they have. Over the past 20 years, the Snowball Church has launched 300 churches that now have at least 1,000 members worshiping every Sunday or Saturday night. They are truly living into their name. They are the Snowball Church. Now here's the unique thing about the Snowball Church. Everyone's a pastor. Everyone's in ministry. And nobody's getting paid. Nobody. Not even the founding pastor who's now leading a 20,000 attendee group on Sunday morning. Everybody's in ministry. Everybody has something to contribute, and nobody's getting paid. So in coaching, in the coach approach, we all have something to contribute. And what we want to tap into is, what is your contribution? Typically that comes from, as you coach someone, you'll hear them talk about, I've always wanted to, or I just feel so passionate about, or my heart is stirred. So we focus on their contribution. Another guiding principle that comes right out of those coaching models is that questions are often more helpful than answers. Now that's kind of an interesting paradox in a way, because often we want the answer, but the questions are more helpful. So, I think a few of you have read the Old or the New Testament from time to time, and they're both filled with great questions. Give me some examples of powerful questions in the Old Testament.
My God, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah, why have you forsaken me? Yeah, there's just heart coming out of that, isn't it? Yeah.
In your hand.
Yeah, what's in your hand? Yeah. Give me another example of a powerful question in the Old Testament.
Whom shall I send?
Whom shall I send? Yeah.
Am I my brother's keeper?
Yeah. Whew. Did you have to bring that question up? Yeah. How about in Genesis, I think it's Genesis 3. Adam and Eve are hiding. They're naked. And God says, where are you? Now I want you to think about that. God's all-knowing. Why is he asking the question? Not for himself, but for their benefit. So the questions that we ask, while we might prefer the answers, the questions get us thinking and help us to come up with our own answers. How about in the New Testament?
Do you want to be healed?
Do you want to be healed? What makes that a great question?
Because you have to think about what you really want.
Yeah. You have to think about what you really, really want.
Who do you say I am?
Yeah, who do you say I am? Yeah. Why is that a great question?
Because it helps you to identify who he is.
Yeah, helps you identify versus just reiterating or regurgitating what someone else said.
What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do? Great question.
What is truth?
What is truth?
Do you love me?
Do you love me? Yeah, wow. And sometimes if you repeat the same question, it even hits harder, doesn't it?
That was actually mine.
That was yours, okay. Great question, yeah. So questions are usually more helpful than answers. And so instead of being like the cosmic dispenser of answers, we ask questions. Accountability and support are the norm. It's like 20 or 30 minutes ago when this expandable ball began to shrink. It needed someone to help it stay expanded. So we need each other. That's one of the guiding principles. We need each other to hold us accountable to offer support, to come alongside. So I mentioned I've been on 5 continents this year already. I was in Zimbabwe in May, and like a typical American, we were boarding the plane, and I was like, I got to get on this plane. We got to get it going. Come on, we got another plane to connect. Typical American, let's go, go, go. The plane was delayed for 38 minutes because one person was missing from the roster. And all the Americans were like, come on, let's go, let's go. No, in Zimbabwe, we wait for everyone. And they delayed the plane 38 minutes. And you know, the gentleman that was late didn't even apologize for being late. And nobody from Zimbabwe was disturbed because they're part of a community. And the community, including everyone, is more important than the one that wants to get going. So in a coaching approach to ministry, we're all about accountability and support. We need each other. And then, of course, we've talked about this already. God is already at work. How can we join what God's doing? How can we recognize what God has been up to? Now, I've been doing most of the talking for the last 40, 45 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is just around your table, I'm going to divide you into groups. I'd like one of the groups, how about those two tables, if you'd combine, and just talk about, so if you were to really apply those principles, how would preaching and teaching be affected? What would change in the way that you delivered worship on Sunday morning if you lived into those guiding principles? So those 2 tables. Okay, and I'll give you about 5 minutes to talk. How about these 2 tables in terms of evangelism and discipleship? What would be different? What's the impact on evangelism and discipleship if you lived into those guiding principles? Okay, those 2 tables. And then over here, the 3 of you, outreach and leadership development. If you really took to heart those guiding principles, what changes? Okay, so you got about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we're just going to share our answers. So if you kind of gather. All right, if you wrap up your conversation, I'd like to hear first from these 2 tables. So how do these principles impact preaching and teaching?
We had rich discussion.
Okay, yeah.
And we talked about, for example, with the first 2, if we started preaching with the premise that there's greatness in everyone and that everyone has something to contribute, that perhaps we would hear more sermons that were grace-filled as opposed to perhaps judgmental or dogmatic. And then, but more importantly, scrolling down to the last one, really should be beginning our sermon preparation and development with the understanding that God is already at work. So if we're doing that, then how would that change the sermons that we deliver? We talked about how using the sermon to pose questions.
Yeah.
Just like Jesus did
Yep.
with many of the parables. He told it and then he asked the people and allowed them to figure out. And then one person in our group shared that when she hears sermons and is allowed to come to her own conclusion, those are the sermons that really stick with her and
Yeah.
she gets a lot out of. So somebody else can share.
Yeah. What else would you add? Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. How do these principles then impact evangelism and discipleship?
It makes it messy.
It- okay. All right. Now you got to say more.
Well, you start with knowing that people are gifted, but you also understand that in that giftedness there is the need to grow, and which allows a mutual commitment, which says that you're going to stick by them and keep doing the hard stuff even when it's hard and growth happens.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to stick with them throughout. Yeah, when it gets hard. Yeah.
Because it will.
It will. Yeah. Absolutely. What else would you add?
This is
Mhm.
my own opinion. We planting churches for 40 years. And that time, I learned a lot of the greatness and the gift and wait for one another as my culture. And the result is more disciples, more people come together
Mm.
because the kindness and the accountability between one another, the support
Mm.
be getting more strong.
Okay. So just watching your hands, it's almost like threads of rope being
Yes.
wound together and getting stronger.
Yes.
Okay. Great. What else would you add? So one of the first groups I worked with was a Southern Baptist group whose way to do evangelism was to take a big Bible and just kind of figuratively hit people over the head with the Word of God. And if you hit them hard enough, it's going to sink in. And then they did some coach training and they thought, first of all, how's that going? Wasn't going too well. And so they decided, what if instead of hitting people over the head with the big Bible, we just said, how you doing? What would be most important for you to talk about? I'm here. And so they practiced deep listening and just kept saying, well, tell me more about that. And they expressed genuine interest in the other person. Now, this is like 15 years after the fact now. That's their evangelism. They go out and they listen. And they connect with people. And they see the A in them. And their results are far, far better than hitting someone over the head. How about over here we had outreach. How does this impact outreach?
It would mean ministry with people instead of ministry to people.
Okay.
And then we also concluded that it would involve more than just an outreach team. It would include those being outreached to. And we also concluded that we wouldn't have to be in control. We wouldn't have to fix everyone and everything. We just have to ask some really good questions. And then we finally concluded that we would more likely have the faith to step out with the reassurance that God is already at work.
Excellent. Excellent. I heard a number of heads nodding throughout that. Yeah, that resonates with people. Say a little more about ministry with people versus ministry to people. Say more about that.
Well, Rich is the genius behind that.
Okay.
Ministry to people is already deciding what they need. Ministry with people is listening to who they are, where they're coming from, recognizing that they know what they need far better than we do, and asking them how we could work with them to meet that need.
Yeah. Do you hear the coaching approach in that? Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Great. Okay. And the last one, how does this all impact leadership development?
Okay. Well, we talked about instead of going into the church and saying this is what you need to do and this is who you need to be, is finding out what their gifts are. And everybody has their own gift, and finding out how those gifts fit into the church, and letting them know that it's not just about the pastor. It's about we're all called into leadership. And once we get their gifts, is finding out where they actually fit and what they can contribute. Just making us accountable to one another, supporting one another. We talked about one of the things that we probably don't do, but it would be a really good idea, is asking those hard questions of those people. Like the questions are usually more helpful than answers. I think we kind of, as pastors, we go through that whole thing where we ask those questions, but we forgot to ask our congregations the questions, and we need to start doing that and helping them to grow and getting them to understand the Bible, and then that way we can start to coach once they start answering those questions.
So I hear you talking about the role of clergy then to be that of coach. Say a little bit more about what that looks like.
I shared at the table something I did in my appointment last year. I decided I didn't know them that well, and they didn't know me that well, so I got them to agree to meet me on a Saturday, and I had them take a Myers-Briggs children's test to learn out what their gifts were. And we talked about what they had been doing. They're a great church already, but there were just more things they wanted to do. They just didn't know how to go about doing it. So just I asked them where they felt like their church was leading them. And I kind of followed their lead as opposed to the other way around. So as clergy, just getting to know who they are and coaching them to go in those particular directions. I found out all of these neat ideas that they had. Instead of me coming in and saying, okay, now I'm the pastor, this is what we're gonna do. I already knew what all of the demographics said, but for me to just go in there and tell them this is who they need to be as a church, they already had an identity, they just needed someone to bring that identity forward. So as clergy, just stop trying to be the dictator when we walk in there and coming up with all these neat ministries when they already have an idea. They know their community better than I did before I walked in there. And now we're going on year 2, and I'm getting to watch them grow and creating, instead of me creating leaders, they're just rising up as leaders themselves.
Wow. Wow, tremendous. Thank you. Thank you. So, based on what we've talked about or what you've heard in the last hour, what's your next step? What's one simple step you can take? Take a moment just around your table again. What's one simple step you can take to move closer toward a coaching approach to ministry?
Do have that right because you're doing your thing. Or they might look at themselves as maybe older and not doing it. Let's face it, a lot of our members have a very down view of themselves.
Along with
They just don't see a lot of positive hanging on. Part of that is the culture of the series. Put ourselves down.
All right, I'd like to hear some of your next steps and to let others hear your next step. So just like popcorn, tell me what your next step is. Who's the first kernel to pop? Practice listening more. Okay, great.
Be with the people and walk with the people.
Be with the people, walk with people.
Consider it as part of your preaching,
Consider this as part of preaching, yeah.
talking about where they are, where they could be, asking the question.
Yeah, sounds like the bridge coaching model. What else? What's another next step? They put you on the spot.
Well, I kind of said what this gentleman said, setting it up with the preaching, that greatness is in everyone, so that when I do ask hard questions, it is coming from a good place already.
Yeah.
We've already built some rapport, versus if I come out cold and ask these questions, I think people might be apprehensive, like, what did you hear? Or who told you something from the past or something?
Yes, yes, very important. Some other next steps.
I do this with our staff that we have,
Mm.
kind of coaching approach with them.
Excellent, yeah. Excellent. Excellent. What additional questions do you have before we take a break and head to dinner? Go ahead.
What do you do when the answer is not in the room? Or I'm not going to say the answer is truly not in the room, but the person states the answer is not in
Okay.
the room.
Okay, so if you ask a question and they don't really have an answer?
No,
Oh.
like if I'm asking a question to person A, but person A discusses people C or group C
Oh,
or
okay.
whatever. But I'm
Okay.
really trying to work with person
Okay.
A.
So actually that happens quite often. You'll ask someone, what do you really want? And they'll say, well, if so-and-so were here, here's what they would say, or here's what they really want. Then I would go back and say, may I just ask that question again? I'm really curious to hear what you really, really want. And I might even ask it a third time. And just kind of focus in on, it's really important for me to hear you. You're here now. So, that help? Yeah, go ahead.
My experience in coaching is that you come alongside somebody
Mm-hmm.
and you meet with them 3, 4, 5, 9 times, and you inevitably find the spot where they're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And you listen, and you listen, and you listen. And it may not be obvious to you, and even if it is obvious to you, they may not be able to hear it if you say it.
Mm-hmm.
They're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, they realize you know they're stuck, and they know that you know that they're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to stop wanting to meet at that point.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What's the next step?
Okay, sure. So just a couple of things that are really important in coaching. One is the relationship's really, really important. And so my assumption is that you've not just focused on the project or the problem, but you've really connected well with the person.
Well, I think you find that they're stuck because
Yeah.
you do have a good rapport.
Yeah, yep, okay, good. So you've got that in place. I would, in that coaching session, say things like, so talk to me about another time when you were stuck. Give me some other examples of people you know that were stuck in case they can't come up with their own. And talk to me about how they got unstuck. I might even say something like, may we set this aside for just a few minutes? And if that were taken care of, what would be the next thing we'd be talking about? So I would just do all kinds of ways to get at that at some point. So let me pause for a moment. Am I answering your question?
No,
No? Okay. Ask it again.
no, I think you heard me.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a matter of you not hearing me. I've concluded that it's not finding the answer for them.
Ah, yeah,
I
you're
don't
right.
think that's,
Yeah.
finding the answer for them is not,
Mhm.
it doesn't seem to help them.
Mhm.
Right.
I, and listening. After a while, that can get annoying.
Sure. Sure.
So, I heard you say, one thing is to change the subject.
Okay, one would be, yeah, what else?
Just change the subject for a while. The
For a
other
bit.
would be to ask them, well, give me a for instance of when you've been stuck before, and what you, or can you think of somebody else that got themselves unstuck?
Yes.
I guess one of the things I'm looking for is when you come to the point where that person's stuck, it's uncomfortable. It's awkward. Again, you know they're stuck, they know you know they're stuck, they know they're stuck, and so there you sit. And it seems to me the tension at that point starts to
Okay.
escalate. So then they don't want to meet.
Okay.
So I'm trying to, that has killed a number of coaching relationships that I've had.
Okay. Okay. How can I help?
I don't want a damn question, I want the answer.
Okay. All right.
Well, then, if that's the case, then they're not looking for coaching, are they?
Well,
Maybe.
I'm thinking of my own self when I was coached and I was stuck. I really did not know how to get out of that.
Yeah. Yes.
Despite all my life experience, everything I've been through, I did not know how to get out of that. Fortunately, the coach I was working with said, can I suggest to you 2 or 3 books
There you go. Yeah.
that may help? At the end of the coaching session, we were doing it by phone, hung up the phone, I jumped on Amazon or somebody, ordered the books.
Yep.
Next few weeks devoured them, and in them, the next time him and I talked, I said, I've read those books, and I think I know what I need to do. And we talked from there. I needed more information than
Yes.
I had.
So, yes. So one of the competencies that a coach has is called direct communication, which is exactly what your coach did with you. May I share with you a couple of books? May I talk to you about what has helped other people? Let's brainstorm who else we might bring into this conversation temporarily to help you with this. It's called direct communication because you're absolutely right. Sometimes, tell me more about that is just dang annoying because you're stuck.
So I'll offer another side of that question. So I had a coach earlier this year, got stuck with some stuff I said wanted to do. And finally, after several coaching sessions, the coach said, what are you afraid of losing
That's what I was gonna say.
if you take this step forward?
Ah,
It turns out there's a whole host of research
Okay.
around
yes.
underlying assumptions to keep things the way
Yes.
they are, rather than actually making the change that I said I want.
Yes.
Or what are you protecting?
Yeah.
Same
What are you
along those
protecting?
What am I protected?
same lines.
Yes. Yes. So in coaching, we often recognize that there's a belief or an assumption behind either our stuckness or what we want. Those are great questions. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I'll say to people, so what's the story you're telling yourself about this?
Do you really want to be well?
Do you really want to be well? If you were unstuck, what would be different? I mean, and I don't even know your name, but I love you talked about it brings tension into it, and it's kind of like fire can be dangerous, except when it's really focused. And when the heat rises, when the tension rises, that can be that pivotal moment for that person if the right question or the right approach is used.
Is everyone coachable?
Ah. Yes. It depends. And no. Ideally, yes. But if you're not ready, you don't want someone to come alongside of you, then no. There's a coach readiness. So we listen for that. Is this congregation ready to take the steps necessary? Yeah.
are there things that we can do in a coaching relationship to prepare for, nurture a breakthrough? You know, when we get into the loop,
Mhm.
you know, we get into circular thinking, and
Mhm.
we're just,
Mhm.
it's more often than not, it's not breaking out of it, it's somebody or breaking into
Yeah,
the
breaking,
loop and
yeah.
helping us to,
Yep.
how do we nurture that? How do we set that up for
Mhm.
success? How do
Okay.
we coach that into being?
Sure, sure. So I'll give one piece, but then I know there are coaches in the room. They might also have something to add. So I think at the start of the coaching, before you begin, you talk about there will come a point when you will get stuck or you will be stumped. And here's what I might do. Here's some typical ways that I'll respond. So now they know and expect that, one, they're going to get stumped. We're going to get to that tension point if we're really doing the work. And here's how we might progress with that. So you talk about that in advance. Others that are coaches, how would you, in that moment, set it up?
Modeling.
Modeling.
I'm being sarcastic. You're modeling.
Okay. Yeah, I am. Right? Yes, I'm trying to model the coaching approach. Yes. Go ahead.
And I'm just gonna say, I am a trained therapist, so I don't wanna be the anti-coach in the room. But I would say patience, because if you really truly think somebody's stuck, it's not gonna be a wham bam thank you man, because it might be an unstuck and then a little baby stuck and then an unstuck and a little baby stuck. So I think definitely whatever you giving off is also gonna feed into like whether that person is sure that they can get unstuck. Like if you look like you frustrated, they frustrated, I'm sure the energy is going down versus up.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I was gonna say something very similar, trust the process. Right?
Yeah.
Just stay in it
Mhm.
and trust the process.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. One of my limiting beliefs is I'm just Val. I'm a nice guy, and what do we say about nice people? They finish last. So 15 years ago when I went to launch my business full time, I kept saying to my coach, I'm just Val, I can't do this, I'm just Val. And he said, what's this just Val stuff? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I never say just Val. And he's like, yeah, you do. He kept pushing me on it, and then I told him the story of I grew up, my dad's a pastor, we lived connected to the church. We shared the same heat. The thermostat was in the church building, not in the parsonage. People could hear everything we're saying, so I needed to be nice because we didn't want people to know that we fought as a family. So I grew up being nice, and I was encouraged to be nice. And being nice benefited me to a point, and now it was not. Was I ready to let go of that belief and that approach? We all have beliefs, we all have things, and they're not going to be changed or turned around instantly. But if we begin to tap into them and shine a flashlight on them, we'll begin to help them break free. Great questions. I know some of you need to go, and I want to recognize that. But any other questions before we end?
What we should do, if it's, you have a bad experience with coaches.
Okay. You've had a bad experience with a coach.
Yeah.
Try another one.
And if it's, you try another one. And you-
Try.
And that thing's
And it still goes. Call me or call, there's a couple of other coaches around here. Don't give up.
Because in my experience, the first one,
Mhm.
coach that I have, it was when I planted in church.
Mm.
And then the coach was confused as a consultant,
Mhm.
and he took the role, and
Yeah.
and so we faced him. We ended in a bad thing
Yeah.
with ideas and everything. So we stopped there. The
So.
same, we wait for that
Mm.
probably a year and a half, and we hire another one. But this one, they come to coach the project and not the pastor.
So I would interview several coaches before you hire your next one and make sure they are right for you. So
Because that's very hard.
it is. It is
Very
very hard.
frustrating.
Yes. It is very frustrating. Thank you very much. I've appreciated all your questions. Enjoy the rest of your time.